Hi, this is Jeff, and my presentation is titled The History of Design Thinking. So what is design thinking and why is it important? Design thinking is a problem-solving methodology guided by human-centric people to solve challenging, complex, and wicked problems. It's also a framework applicable to doctoral students solving a problem of practice. Riddle and Weber first coined the term wicked problems, and they describe a wicked problem using terms or traits such as malignant, vicious, and tricky. Some examples of wicked problems, in their view, was where in a city to locate a freeway, a major interchange, modifying school curricula, confronting crime, and adjusting tax rates. And what they also made a point of saying is that what differentiates a wicked problem from, say, a tame problem is that wicked problems are affected by larger societal issues such as poverty or politics. As part of their discussion, they did discuss science and engineering problems and they classified them differently for a couple of reasons. One, science and engineering problems do follow a systematic systems engineering type process from start to finish, but in many cases they have more control over outside forces or factors. And in some cases, or while they acknowledge that issues in science and engineering are complex compared to societal issues, they refer to them or some of these type of problems as tame problems. Riddle and Weber did not provide guidance on how to solve wicked problems, but I will provide an example and a methodology of how to do that. So, Riddle and Weber define 10 characteristics of wicked problems. I have 6 here on this chart. Number 1, they said a problem statement could not be formulated. They said there was no stopping rule, which I read as it was very difficult to bound the problem and know where to start and stop. Think of it that way. Every problem was unique. There was no opportunity to learn by trial and error, or no opportunity to share a best practice or a lesson learned. There was one chance to solve a problem, and I guess you could use locating a freeway as an example, because once you put a freeway in, you really couldn't move it. Solutions were not true or false, just good or bad. As part of my research, I spoke with Lindenwood Assistant Professor Dr. Michelle Whitaker, who has had experience in using the design thinking methodology to solve, I'll say, wicked problems. And she had a very profound comment, I thought, which was especially when education, as an example, is affected by societal issues like poverty, like state and federal government policies. When solving a problem, it's important to peel back the layers of the problem to effect change. So my research methodology spanned 100 years, and through this 100 years you'll see some names, and some you'll recognize, like John Dewey, Kurt Lewin in the field of education. Kurt Lewin, the founder of Action Research. I briefly talked about Riddle and Weber and their perspectives on wicked problems, but I'm going to shift and start talking about the Stanford University design thinking process. So the design thinking methodology developed at Stanford University consisted of 5 steps: empathy, define, ideate, prototype, and validate. The empathy stage was all about gaining understanding, situational awareness, and collaboration among stakeholders around a problem to be solved. Define was about converging on a clear problem statement, and in the example I'm going to use, the researchers used traditional research-based methods, qualitative methods, such as conducting focus groups, coding feedback, looking for patterns. The third phase, ideate, was about generating, brainstorming a list of potential solutions. Prototyping, the fourth step, was about creating and developing a representative low-fidelity artifact. And the reason for low fidelity is when you have a high-fidelity artifact or high-fidelity prototype, you're likely not to get as much feedback as if your artifact or prototype was lower fidelity. And then, of course, validate was testing the prototype, using the prototype, testing it, and assessing if it met the desired outcome. So some years ago, I'd say within the last 10 years or so, Flint, Michigan had a water contamination problem. And I'm not sure to this day if it's completely solved. But the water supply system was contaminated with lead. And in the middle of your screen, you'll see a picture of 4 different bottles of water, and you can see how discolored they are. And anyway, just a bad situation. But the implication in terms of education was that it resulted in school-age children having cognitive impairment. And so the school district or districts within the Flint, Michigan metro area needed some help. And so some researchers from Michigan State University came in to work with educators and people in the community to help solve the problem, which specifically was how can we teach, or how best do we teach students that have been cognitively impaired. So step 1 was the researchers recruited 9 educators and administrators to work with. I was really impressed that they went out into the community and visited shopping malls, businesses, schools. They really worked to gain a community, a holistic community awareness of the problem. And then they started their 5-step process. And what impressed me about how they showed empathy is they presented themselves as resources to help. They did not go in saying, we know just what to do and we're here to solve the problem for you. This was about working together. Number 2, defining the problem. So similar to the process description I just discussed on the previous chart, the researchers conducted focus groups, interviews, and used traditional qualitative methods to come up with what was several problem statements in which they shared, based on the feedback, with the educators and administrators to achieve a defined problem, and one that was prioritized as the most helpful problem to solve. And I thought that was a really key step in the process. The third step they did was, once they had collaboratively agreed to problem definition, they then brainstormed solutions of how to create lesson plans specifically to teach cognitively impaired students. And they took their ideas and they prototyped them through different media, such as creating a YouTube video, a web page, use of pamphlets, or even cartoons. And what they wound up converging on was the use of cartoons as a preferred option for delivering lesson plans. and they chose 5 lesson plans topics around healthy bodies, healthy mind, healthy student, healthy world, and healthy relationship. Now, the key point I want to make is that the way I just presented this chart, it comes across like this was a very linear, sequential process. It was anything but. There was conflict along the way. The researchers did, just reading their research, an extraordinary job of managing conflict, keeping people from tangenting into, off the problem statement. And while they went through the process, the 5 steps, initially there was some circling back to converge on the eventual solution to the problem. I was really interested in the cartoons. I would have never thought about use of cartoons to help with lesson plans. But in doing some research, what I found was the visual images appeal to a diverse spectrum of school-age children. They communicate curriculum subject matter content with appropriate language. They provided brief, differentiated, and relatable instruction without bias or stigma, and resulted in a productive learning environment. And they did borrow this idea from another school district in northern Michigan that was focused on socio-emotional issues for a different reason. It wasn't water contamination, but it was found to be a very effective solution to help cognitively impaired students in learning. So moving to my summary and key takeaways chart. Applying design thinking principles did solve this particular wicked problem of practice. Empathy was a continuous theme throughout the research process. I thought the use of prototyping was not only a differentiator for solving this problem, but through many of the sources that I researched, prototyping was used to help solve the problem. I thought in the example, the way they converged on a definitive problem statement was really great, and that's really key. And if you recall back to one of the characteristics that Riddle and Weber said, is that you really can't formulate a problem statement, but these researchers did, consistent with what Whitaker said about peeling back the layers of the onion to a point of being able to effect change. Thus, sufficient evidence exists that Stanford University's design thinking process, complemented in this example with use of traditional research methods, resulted in a solution to a wicked problem. And through the research, there are other processes that have been shown to be effective in solving wicked problems. And then the last point is Lindenwood University, through a research innovation lab, is launching a social innovation challenge in the spring of 2021, where they're going to provide opportunity for faculty, staff, and students to learn and use design thinking skills. Here's some key references, and here are the references for the images. Thank you very much. I look forward to your questions.